Hi, everyone. It's Naomi Wolf, live streaming This Week in Congress and sending it to all of our members at Daily Clout. I'm really happy to see you. I'm reading from the Week in Congress, or summarizing from the weekincongress.com. I really recommend that site. Of course, I even more recommend Daily Clout if you're less of a wonky person and more of a busy person like most of us, because we explain in plain English what those bills are actually doing. But for the week that ended last week, there has been a lot of maneuvering, of course, because Congress is coming to the end of the year. So there was back and forth on the budget. A resolution was passed that kept money flowing till the 21st, when Congress has to fund 25% of the agencies that are left or else face a shutdown. Of course, Trump said that if he didn't get the $5 billion he wants for his border wall, he won't sign the funding bill and he'll close down the government. And he's been warned that he doesn't have the votes for this, but it's making great political theater for his base. And so the back and forth that is kind of behind the scenes is that the House wants to put the $5 billion in a continuing resolution, where the Senate has no plans to provide wall money. So what that kind of means is that this posturing that he's going to close down the government if he doesn't get his wall is kind of meaningless when it comes to the Senate. Moving on to the yearly budget review. This is from the Congressional Budget Office, which keeps track of spending and is kind of a transparent, nonpartisan agency to oversee spending. What's really important, what you should know, is that in 2018, which ended, by the way, technically on September 30th, the federal budget deficit, which remember we used to hear about, especially from conservatives, totaled $779 billion, which is $113 billion more than the shortfall that was recorded in 2017. I'm going to say that again. In 1 year, the deficit has gone up $113 billion in the United States of America. And this is not a partisan issue, but this really doesn't get a lot of press. This is, at a time when our infrastructure is crumbling. There's no money for kids to be educated at public universities, and we're barely being told that the deficit is up by over $100 billion from last year. I think that's pretty extraordinary, especially because it's a Republican administration. It has been, and this, runaway spending and debt has been in the past a Republican issue. So just noting that. So some of the really interesting newsworthy things that did happen last week: Congress did revise its procedures for what is supposed to happen if a congressional staffer is sexually harassed by another staffer or by a member of Congress. Of course, I think that's really interesting and necessary because the procedures in the past were super arcane and hard to pursue, like a lot of these procedures, when they're pretty much aimed to protect the patriarchy, I would say. And so you have to kind of put your life on hold in order to file a complaint, let alone pursue a complaint successfully. So this process used to take nearly a year after reporting that someone sexually harassed you, before even going to a resolution or to court. Now, the reform says that you can file a complaint within 26 days of the incident, or you can file directly with the courts. I mean, to me as a citizen, it's kind of shocking that you couldn't, because any man or woman on the street who's not being harassed by a member of Congress allegedly does have the right to file directly with the courts. So this shows that basically Congress had impunity in terms of having a court case filed against him or her for harassing a staff member, and that impunity is over. So that's good news, I think, for a lot of Americans. Again, not a partisan issue. Now let's turn to the Farm Bill. On the one hand, what's great is that this is bipartisan. Both sides wanted it. It's a gigantic bill, and it deals with crops and water pollution, but it also includes issues like food stamps, and other things that Republicans tend to call entitlements and Democrats tend to call social programs. And I'm getting really nice comments there, and I'll respond to them in just a minute. So what I want to call your attention to is that on the, one thing that I think a lot of people feel good about is that it doesn't cut nutritional assistance for the hungry. It does not. So food stamps are not cut. It maintains the current SNAP benefit levels. So again, what are SNAP? For those of you who don't know, it's food stamps. It's assistance to, people with children who depend on food stamps, people who are hungry, people who are underserved with housing and who are hungry, who don't have jobs, they still get food stamps. So it does create, it has a handout sort of, welfare for the dairy industry. It creates a dairy margin coverage for low cost funding for dairy farmers when they need it. It provides a way for dairy farmers to borrow money. This is nice. A lot of people like this. Again, not partisan. $40 million in mandatory funding for scholarships at the 1890 land-grant universities. A lot of universities across the country are land-grant, meaning they were established in the 19th century to educate, initially farmers and their children, and now they educate a lot of people who can't afford more expensive colleges. They're good schools, so that's nice that there's some scholarships in the Farm Bill. A little creepy, bears more research. It provides $185 million in mandatory funding for the, quote, Foundation for Future Food and Agriculture Research. Future Food and Agriculture Research. I'll take a closer look at what that is. In the past, we found that those kinds of entitlements really go to basically a way to cover handing money to private industry. So we'll take a look at what that is. What is Future Food and Agriculture Research? This is sneaky. It's a Farm Bill. It authorizes $350 million a year for new broadband infrastructure. All right, $350 million, not once, not twice, but per year, every year until this is changed, right? For new broadband infrastructure. So this is a gigantic gift to the telecom industry. And what we don't know, and our community is very concerned and alert about this, is whether that's going to be 5G. Because many of you who have followed my reporting on Daily Clout, other reporting, Thea Scarato's really, really great article that we published on Daily Clout about 5G from the Environmental Health Trust, you know that 5G is this new kind of place in the broadband that the telecom industry wants to, roll out in 30 cities. It's actually rolled out in a number of cities. And yes, rural areas need broadband, but what is, first of all, concerning is why is a Farm Bill awarding broadband infrastructure? And in what way does that affect farming? Is that the right place for it? Or is it a way to hide these gigantic gifts? And the other question is what kind of broadband? I'm all for, a lot of people are for wiring rural areas. Farmers and others deserve, people in rural areas deserve good internet. But what is that? Incredible gift, $350 million a year, every year. This also is very newsworthy. It continues the energy title with $125 million in new mandatory funding for biorefinery assistance program and bioenergy payments. And it maintains the Rural Energy for America program. That's fine, but pay attention to what is getting funded there biorefinery assistance and bioenergy payments. So what is this talking about? As many of you know who follow our reporting, the biofuels industry is a recent huge industry. It sounds really great. It's a great name cosmetically. Biofuels, yay, it sounds so green. But if you really look into it, as we did at Daily Cloud, it's very disturbing because it takes agricultural waste, it takes food waste, animal waste. From like Purdue, if Purdue wants to sell the chicken fat and chicken skin and chicken bones that would otherwise be expensively thrown out, the biofuels industry takes pork fat and animal carcasses and animal waste, as well as agricultural waste, biomass from farming and so on, and processes it so that it can be turned into fuel. And the fuel, which is 5 to 10% now of aviation, is using this because it's cheaper. It could be. It is totally untested on the environment and on human beings. And I've been following it closely because I think it could be one reason that our skies are such a mess, contributing to asthma, allergies, pollution, deeply untested. If you look up effective biofuels on the environment, look at peer-reviewed studies, effective biofuels on human beings, you'll find nothing because it's a very brand new technology. It only became kind of legal in 2016 for use in aviation, certainly. And it hasn't been around long enough to be tested, and there's no political will to test it. So I think that's very, very dangerous. And it's also very bad for the environment. A lot of environmental concerns groups are coming out and saying this is bad for the environment because the kind of farming and processing that goes into creating biofuels destroys forests, creates devastation overseas. But here at home, I think this is a gigantic gift to the biofuel industry, which is a gigantic industry. And it's an energy industry, right? Don't be fooled. It's not a bunch of hippies, recycling lard from their local diner. It's the usual suspects, big oil, branching out into this new energy. And it just hands over this money basically to private interests. It expands access to FSA farm loans for veteran and beginning farmers. Well, that's cool. I'm married to a veteran now as of 3 weeks ago. And I know that, programs for vets, they all deserve, any program that the government wants to give them. And also beginning farmers, that's cool. So there's a way to expand your access if you're a new farmer to money for farming. And it improves transparency through annual reports of USDA lending activity. So I'm all in favor of transparency, but that also bears a closer look. So basically, it sounds like a farm bill. This is one of those bills that we see over and over again at Daily Cloud because we actually read the bill. It's not really a farm bill, right? It's not substantively a farm bill. Under the guise of calling it a farm bill, there's a gigantic gift for the telecoms. There's a gigantic gift for energy companies, and there's a gigantic gift for some mysterious future food and agriculture research, which is likely to be tied in turn to private industry. So, and then there's a tiny little drop in the bucket of funding for scholarships, a tiny little drop of improved access to loans for veterans and beginning farmers. And this is, I just want to share so you really get it. This is so classic. It's almost a formula for what bills are like. And we read them every single week. There's huge gifts to private industry buried in a bill that sounds like it's about something else. And then there are tiny, tiny little drip, 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 drip cosmetic gifts so that these sponsors can go out and say, I brought home, I sponsored this fantastic bill for beginning farmers, or I made it easier for veterans to become farmers, or there's going to be more transparency in lending because of my bill. Well, actually, it's like a giant cake made of, manure with a couple of delicious tiny nuggets of gold buried deep, deep within it and sugar coated with a wonderful name, so that everyone who baked the cake out of manure can say, look, this is really full of gold and covered with sugar. So that's what this bill is. Moving on quickly, the House moved over 20 bills this week, and you can see, we'll provide a link to this on Daily Clout. And otherwise, people are really wrapping it up and getting ready to head home. There's some bills that are up for discussion and debate. Big Bear Land Exchange Act was agreed to in the House. What that does, it hands over chunks of Big Bear. There's some, very cosmetic ones like Preserving America's Battlefields Act. Who's going to complain about preserving America's battlefields? There's a George W. Bush Childhood Home Study Act agreed to, which, again, doesn't seem very substantive. And again, these cosmetic bills. There's HR 6118 was agreed to in the House to direct the Secretary of the Interior to annually designate at least one city in the United States as an American World War II heritage city. And that's cosmetic, and this is so common, right? The little kind of, oh, you can say you designated a city, in this historic way. It takes no political capital to do that. And then there's HR 6665, Offshore Wind for Territories Act, which is passed and agreed to in the House. Now, that doesn't mean that it's agreed to altogether, but it means it's moving. And that should be really interesting. That should be about generating wind power off the territories of the United States. So that's what happened last week. Pretty both incredible in terms of movement with sexual harassment, and not incredible, very much business as usual in terms of certainly the Farm Bill. And Daisy 351 says, yay, Naomi, you're amazing. Thank you, Daisy. And Daisy was saying, I was just talking about the process of being sexually harassed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was 16 in court and they clowned me and made me describe what a penis looked like. Super embarrassing as a 16-year-old. And I just want to say, Daisy, I'm so sorry. Unfortunately, your story sounds like it couldn't be true, but it's true. I'm sure. I believe you. And I know that many, many, many young women, especially also young men who try to report sexual harassment, are humiliated and deterred in this way. It's certainly a deterrent for a young woman. So embarrassing to be asked that by, often by police or by court officials. And it's really just a way to get young women to give up and go home, get teenagers to give up and go home. I'm really sorry, and I think I'm very proud of you for having reported at 16. It was a hard thing to do. She says, please come out to the Bay Area, Berkeley, Sebastopol, California, and speak. We appreciate you over here. Daisy, that's so nice. And I have family in Sebastopol, and I grew up in San Francisco, so that's definitely my home turf, and I'd love to. So thank you. I will do everything I can to get out there and speak, and I always do feel like I'm coming home when I'm out in Northern California. And Alex Simonov says, hi from Macedonia. I love your work and thank you for exposing the geoengineering issue. Alex, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm also really pleased that the geoengineering reporting that we've done at Daily Clout, which Alex is referring to, has made it around the world. And it's so exciting that we have someone like you, Alex, watching and commenting from Macedonia, which I've also visited, which is also beautiful. For those of you who haven't been following what we're doing, mostly on Twitter, but also whenever we can in videos that I upload to Daily Clout on geoengineering, it's a huge story. It's too complex for me to address in depth here, but suffice to say there are new technologies that are being deployed right now. One of them is solar radiation management, and it's also being deployed over Europe. We keep getting reports from Spain, from Germany, from Sweden, maybe Macedonia, though when I was in That part of Europe, I did not see geoengineering in the sky. But there's like this horrible technology where it's funded by big oil, where airplanes and drones are and weather balloons are spraying particulates, sulfites, which is pollution, and also spraying um, alumina particles into the air, and then they pretend that it's just normal contrails, but it expands, it creates cloud cover artificially, and it dims the sun. And believe it or not, Harvard has this highly funded program that they've already rolled out in Arizona called ScopeX. Bill Gates is funding it. Big Oil is partnered with David Keith, the lead scientist. Tar sands magnates are funding them to dim the sun. It's greenwashed through Harvard, it's greenwashed through Stanford and the Carnegie Foundation. But really what it is, clearly, it seems to me, is an attack on solar. It's a way to say, oh, we're just going to experiment and dim the sun. That could be good for global warming. What they don't tell you is that you have to keep spraying this solar radiation management particulate in the air forever, or else you get, in their words, quote, catastrophic warming. And then they hold the patents. They hold the IP. Harvard, Carnegie, these venture capitalists called intellectual ventures out of Silicon Valley, they hold the IP, and they're the ones behind this push and this horribly cynical PR campaign calling this a climate solution. All right, let's see. What do other people say? Thank you. Alex says, yes, it's so obvious here too. Oh no. In Macedonia as well, Alex is reporting geoengineering. And I'd love to know what you see. Alex, do you post images of that, please, to me at Daily Cloud or else on Twitter, Naomi Wolf Twitter, and I'll add Macedonia to what's being, it's clearly part of a global program. And in fact, I did report on funding for scientists around the world. They convened in Europe, and then they were basically taught to do this solar radiation management. And they've gone to all over the world, including the Horn of Africa, and they're geoengineering in the sky. The most appalling criminal assault on Mother Earth and humanity. Nolan Griffin says, try Ecosia, the search engine that plants trees, just like Google, except they donate their money to tree planting NGOs. That sounds cool. Thank you. Ecosia, thanks for that recommendation. And then Alex says, people have adopted the US term chemtrails for the aluminum aerosols. So that's an interesting point, Alex. I actually tend to encourage people not to use that term. I mean, obviously in Macedonia, you should use whatever terms you want to, further people's understanding of the issue. But I prefer geoengineering to chemtrails because to me, chemtrails are not journalistically rigorous. Everything's a chemical. And they also kind of, in my view, the word presumes to know what these emissions are, whereas we're just now reporting out, what these various technologies are and what's in these emissions. A really scary thing for the US and for Britain, and I found it out through reading bills like I did, today for Daily Cloud, is that the meteorological societies that are supposed to assess weather have been privatized in the US and also in Britain. And also very disturbing, there was a bill that Zoe Lofgren passed last year that handed over all the tech and IP generated from the quote unquote weather industry to private stakeholders. So it's this weather industry. So for all of these reasons, I prefer to say geoengineering, or to use the actual terms that through our research and reporting we've identified. There are various technologies. Again, I'll list them quickly. Solar radiation management, to me, is the scariest. This is the spraying, as Alex pointed out, of alumina in the air, as well as sulfates. David Keith says it will kill 10,000 people, minimum, right? And he's not bothered by that. There's also stratospheric aerosol injection. And this is also like spraying. Sometimes you'll see these long sprays of particulate. that go for miles and miles, that we confirm to be underway. It's a program sponsored by Exxon through the US Department of Energy. It's on their website. This is not like a conspiracy theory. It's right there on their website. There's also marine cloud brightening. Again, they have geniuses thinking of the names for these terrible technologies. Marine cloud brightening is adding sulfates to ship tracks. So a major source of greenhouse gases and air pollution is ship contrails, and marine cloud brightening is funded by Bill Gates. Dr. Ken Caldera at the University of Washington is one of the lead scientists on this technology. Bill Gates has created a cloud nozzle, which Ken Caldera is using and his team are using out of Washington, which is probably why Vancouver so often reports horrible, horrible geoengineered skies. And, I've witnessed this Central Oregon, appalling, terrible geoengineered skies. And so that's called marine cloud brightening. It's sulfates dispersed through ship tracks. And sometimes you can see this when you see over the horizon, like something that looks like a ship contrail, but it kind of disperses across the sky and creates artificial cloud cover. And there's cloud seeding, which is also vastly underreported. And again, it sounds great, but it's appalling. It's people shooting clouds with silver iodide or silver nitrate using flares, like ground-based generators, or using planes, using drones to basically kill the cloud, dissolve the cloud, steal the water. And the thing is, you don't realize that, we're so arrogant, human beings. There's so much that people don't know about clouds and how clouds work and how they work to moderate the climate of our beautiful planet. We don't know. They're like these magical things that we don't know that much about. They're mysteries about how they work. And so all over the world now, China's doing massive cloud seeding. Australia, the hydros, Tasmania Hydro. These are energy companies, right? They're doing massive cloud seeding. They're stealing water for their own purposes or redirecting water, dissolving clouds, basically wrangling the clouds and I don't know what to say, killing them, like macerating the clouds, right? And they're doing it also more and more in Europe. They use lasers in Europe, and they are doing it in Canada. Actually, believe it or not, insurance companies in Canada, private companies, are geoengineering with cloud, like they create sounds aimed at clouds to disperse hail, to protect crops, or to, make cars not get hailed on, for insurance purposes. So this is going on a massive scale. Like the entire plateau of Tibet is being staged as a launching pad for Chinese cloud seeding. And just to wrap up our headlines with a great deal of tragedy, apart from not knowing what role in climate change and heating the planet dissolving the clouds has, right? I mean, do I even have to say this? Like, you dissolve the clouds in a man-made way and tamper with this beautiful homeostasis of this planet, and you think there aren't going to be unintended consequences, or that isn't a role in heating the planet and ruining the seasons? Of course it is, by definition. You're engaging in climate modification when you destroy or redirect clouds. But in addition to that, they use, as I mentioned, silver iodide and silver oxide in cloud seeding, and those make fire burn hotter. They also use alumina in cloud seeding and in geoengineering, and that alumina has 4 times the conductivity, of steel, so the heat conductivity. So we have lovely Daisy calling in. She's in Northern California, where I grew up. They had horrible, horrible wildfires. They keep having horrible, horrible wildfires. How can we ignore the possibility? And PG&E cloud seeds like crazy in Northern California and in LA. How can we ignore the likelihood that the spraying and spraying of clouds, which then rains, goes onto the trees, onto the earth, onto the houses, these chemicals make fires burn hotter. These wildfires are burning in ways we've never seen wildfires burn before. ScopeX, Harvard's experiment using alumina, is right next door in Arizona, right? I had people on our Twitter feed asking David Keith, is this going to affect wildfires? Is this going to cause drought in Arizona, your experiment using alumina? Alumina has, again, 4 times the heat conductivity of steel. So I'm not a scientist, I'm just a citizen, but it seems obvious to me that if you spray chemicals that make wildfires burn hotter again and again and again over areas that then suffer from out of control wildfires, there could well be a connection there, and you should stop. Alex asks if I'm aware of Dane Wigington's work, and yes, I am. There's a lot of important work that he has done, and I fully credit that he's done some very extraordinary reporting. And Nolan Griffin, who told us about Ecosia, says, you're welcome. And he says, also, unlike Google, Ecosia makes an honest effort to protect your privacy. Well, that is really good to know. And I will check out Ecosia immediately. I wonder what they do with all of our data. It's so valuable, but I would love to believe, and I hope someone creates a market advantage in protecting users' privacy. So Ecosia is the search engine we're going to be looking at. We have a new friend in Macedonia. Alex, welcome. It's so nice to talk to you. We have a new friend in Northern California who is very brave, Daisy, and talked about coming forward to report her sexual harassment as a teenager. I'm grateful to you for what you did. Daisy, you may not see the results immediately, but I know that you made some 16-year-old today safer as a result. And we talked about what happened in Congress, and we summarized the latest Daily Clout reporting on geoengineering, which I think is the biggest story, the biggest danger facing the human population at this time, in addition to the ones we already know about. So on a happier note, it's such an honor to be with you. I'm going to wrap up. Please, if you like and support this kind of reporting, honest updates, real bills, and I want to do it around the world for democracies around the world, not just the United States as we grow, please become a member of Daily Clout. We have a brand new website. It's launched, dailyclout.io, and you can support us with a membership. It's $3.99 a month, or a one-time gift if that's too steep. I know times are tough, or just your love and hugs sent virtually. We love it all, and I'll share it with our wonderful staff, the young people, especially here at Daily Clout, who work so hard to read the bills, make the blogs, make the videos, help with the reporting, do the graphics, and keep you informed. All right, well, take care and have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, and please stay in the conversation. It's Naomi Wolf with Daily Clout.